Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to wait another couple of minutes to allow a few more people to join us. In the meantime, we've got a couple of kind of pre-webinar questions if you fancy kind of filling them in. Be interesting to see the data. If you could just put your answers A, B, C, or D into the chat window, that would be great. Lovely. So let's get started. Thank you all very much for joining us. We're here today to talk about AOVPN and the PowerOn Dynamic Profile Configurator tool that we are very proud of here at PowerOn. And I'm very happy to be joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Richard Hicks, and who literally has written the book on the subject.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Leo. It's great to be here.
So just want to kind of start off, how did you kind of get into AOVPN direct access? It's always an interesting tale.
Yes, excellent. So I have been working in IT for 25 plus years or so, and always very strong networking, always had very strong networking background, and as a Windows system administrator, was probably one of the few Windows admins that really understood TCP networking, right? And so I kind of gravitated towards those types of solutions. I was doing edge security and remote access for a large financial institution here in the U.S. and was working with legacy products, old products like Microsoft ISA server back in the day, and did a lot of work with those solutions. And then when Microsoft came out with direct access, I'd used VPN for many years, right? I mean, we used VPN for administration for the longest time, but I loved the elegance of direct access, and it was a fantastic solution. So I really kind of threw myself into that, kind of became a de facto expert there, ended up writing a book on direct access as well. And then when Microsoft was obvious they were moving away from that, and talking about always on VPN, I thought, oh, how can they take away this fantastic technology, right? Direct access is awesome. It just needs to be improved and built upon. And ultimately, when we made the pivot to always on VPN, it's the same thing, only different. And I think that one of the biggest challenges and limitations, at least at the outset as well, and even today, is the management piece, is that it has a very specific, management model, and one in which you guys have built a fantastic solution that addresses some of those shortcomings and limitations. So I'm excited to tell the folks on the call today all about this tool and why I'm excited about it, and learn more about it too, because obviously this is your tool, you built it, and you are the master of this solution. So excited to be here with you for sure.
Thank you. And so just for those who may not necessarily know who we are, may have kind of seen it from your tweets and things, We're Power On Platforms, a kind of a managed and consultancy professional services company based here in the UK, kind of operating kind of globally where customers require us to. And we're very proud of our kind of Microsoft certifications you can see at the bottom, but also the client list. And it's nice to see Telford and Wrekin up there, which is our first kind of DPC case study, which I'm very pleased to say was glowing. So kind of what got you kind of interested in DPC, and especially when there are kind of other management and kind of control capabilities out there for AOVPN?
So excellent point. So I have, for those on the call who are not familiar with what I do, I'm an independent consultant, and I specialize in two broad categories: enterprise mobility and security infrastructure. I do a lot of work with remote access solutions, obviously in the Microsoft space, but I also implement a lot of non-Microsoft enterprise mobility solutions. I do a lot of work around certificate services and PKI. Now, when I first started deploying always on VPN, the Intune aspect of that was obviously quite rudimentary, and of course at the time no one had any sort of Intune licenses. In the early days of always on VPN, and I had customers who still have on-premises Active Directory. They're managing their Windows estate using group policy, and the first question that would come up is, can I continue to do this? I want to replicate the direct access model. Administrators love direct access, at least for its ease of administration, because it uses group policy. I mean, everything you do in the remote access management console, that the remote access management console is effectively a group policy, editing tool, right? So it just pushes it into AD. It gets out to the settings, go to your clients and servers, and it works. And people were looking for an analog for always on VPN for that particular model. So of course, we try to hack together solutions. We use, a PowerShell script and, run it as a startup script or a logon script or something to that effect. But those are really, really kludgy and very error prone, very time consuming, and of course, not dynamic. And I think that's one of the things that really makes your solution fantastic, is that we can deploy a PowerShell script at logon to a device and implement the always on VPN tunnel, but that's not the end of it. If you ever need to change any settings, you'll know that a lot of times you have to either run some PowerShell scripts to affect those changes, or worse, you have to remove the profile and recreate it. And doing that with PowerShell is, again, tedious, time consuming, and error prone. So your tool simplifies all that. It basically makes, what I like about it is that it returns the direct access management paradigm to always on VPN. And for my customers who are not yet moving to Intune, have no plans to move to Intune, and just simply want to leverage Active Directory and group policy, then this is the tool of choice.
Yes, so that is really one of the key things why we ultimately we saw the exact same thing. So I've been doing, direct access and then AOVPN on and off for a good kind of 5-6 years now, and again, direct access, as you say, had a brilliant, simple to use command structure and module and all of that stuff. The IPv6 certainly caused some headaches here and there, but again, especially as then the Microsoft messaging was really don't use direct access, use this completely equivalent solution over here called AOVPN.
Yes, which by the way wasn't exactly completely equivalent, was it?
Well, no. So I'd rock up as a kind of a consultant, go, hey, we're going to implement this, that, the other, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, how are you planning on managing this thing?
Exactly.
And the poor administrators, a lot of them can do some levels of PowerShell, but especially when you're talking about company-wide math, thousands of devices, and talking about needing to dynamically delete the profile and recreate it, or just generally modify it, add routes in, especially as, again, doesn't handle DNS very easily. So
of course,
root lists become can be very challenging to
and even then,
implement.
and I think one of the things that our audience is really going to be impressed by your solution is the fact that it's not just the fact that we're implementing the out-of-the-box always-on VPN client configuration settings. We can do that, and you can do that with PowerShell today. The challenge is that there are many settings, numerous settings, that need to be adjusted and fine-tuned to have a positive experience with always-on VPN, and those settings are not exposed anywhere, even in PowerShell. So you have to go edit configuration files. And in that scenario, that becomes extremely tenuous, right? So I think when we get to the part of the webinar where we start talking about some of the optimizations that we're able to implement using this platform, I think people will really, it's really an eye-opening experience, the power and capability that we have here.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we tried to do as we started building the product, because of course when you're writing those XML files, that experience in its own right is a terrifying experience if you're not used to XML, and so error prone.
Well, and if you'll recall, one of our earliest engagements when I first started working with you was that some of the custom cryptography wasn't working, and if you'll recall, you'll remember the syntax was different for encryption method.
Yeah.
But syntax is the same for cipher transforms or something like that. So it's just like, how is an administrator ever going to know that, right?
Yeah.
Here we put it in a wizard. It's a drop-down list. You can't get it wrong, so you're in good shape.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that we always try to do as well is where there is user input into it. For example, you're adding you need to enter your the URL that you're going to connect to. We try and do as much validation on that to make sure that it actually looks like a URL. Obviously, we can't completely assume or control things, but we then bomb out and provide error messaging before you do something particularly silly that we can try and detect.
Outstanding. That's fantastic.
So I might have gone a little bit off topic already. So just as a quick agenda, we're going to kind of run through a quick overview of what DPC is, a little more visually than what we've been kind of talking through. Kind of discuss some of the really exciting new features that are coming in 3.0, which I'm very pleased to kind of announce is now in the kind of a release candidate stage for our existing customers. And then we're going to talk around some of those advanced features that Richard's already kind of alluded to. And then hopefully at the end I already see we've got one question in there. So please do keep your questions coming, and we'll hopefully answer some of them at the end. So ultimately, we've kind of talked about some of the advantages of DPC at this point, but ultimately what it is a way of deploying your AOVPN policy via your traditional management tools, your group policy, and ultimately leveraging the capabilities built into Active Directory to provide a resilient replication engine and a well-known tooling to get those settings onto a device, and then the DPC client, which sits on the client, takes all of those settings, generates the XML, and kind of injects that into the operating system. And so that allows us to provide much greater control and resiliency to things like the management of those profiles, updating them, simplifying that management story. And because we are dynamically generating the profile at the client side at client time, we can be smarter about certain elements, which we'll kind of get onto in the advanced features. So just to kind of give you a few screenshots of what this tool looks like. I mean, ultimately it's a Windows service, so there's not a huge amount that we can kind of show off, but you'll see you've got here some kind of the options within the group policy manager. Those settings of like any other group policy setting, you get the options to fill in your details. We've got various help settings, and again, Thank you very much, Richard, for some of these. Like a lot of this is based off of your wonderful blog. So
very good.
And again, it's putting the information next to the settings, because again, XML files, the documentation for AOVPN from the kind of a Microsoft standpoint is certainly scattered, shall we say.
That is for sure.
And then ultimately the manage or the reporting and the feedback engine for it is all fully based on event the Windows event tracing, so we can get very detailed information out of the tool all the way down to kind of the debug level should you really need it. But if you have any issues, it should show up in there. And then ultimately it is just injecting the profile into Windows so that you can manage it like you would any other tool. And this is for me, it's quite an interesting slide. It kind of shows you where DPC is a tool, where it isn't a tool as such. So kind of where on the PowerShell and the config manager side, you're kind of having to manage everything yourselves apart from the actual operating system elements. And to some extent, you can kind of give all of that up for the Intune. But I think, as you'd agree, Richard, not every setting in Intune works well. And there's
or at all.
Certainly...
That's correct, yes.
Or it's normally 3 months after they release a feature to it that it might actually work.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And then again, there's still stuff in the Intune UI that's broken today, or just some of the most common settings. I mean, settings that I will set on every single deployment that are still not exposed in the Intune UI. And it could be a checkbox. It could just be a field where you put in something, and it would be so trivial for them to do, but yet these features don't exist, and I think that's why this is going to be really educational for your audience to see some of the tools that you've built here that allow them to do those things that they can't do in Intune, or that they would have to custom script a solution and manage themselves. So.
Yes, so that's certainly why there's a few stars there on the Intune side. Is ultimately you can let Intune do the profile generation if you don't want certain settings that aren't available that way, in which case you got to fail back to writing your own XMLs.
Or you have to write your own XML, or you end up having to take additional, additional administrative burden to build other tools or use other things to manage those settings when you can do it all in one console on your solution.
Yeah, and so with DPC, we're using both some of the same APIs that Intune uses, but we've actually then been able to use some of the other APIs that are available to Windows that Intune can't natively talk to. So, for example, the underlying Win32 API that's been around since the early days, that has certain settings available to it. And we're now experimenting with some new features, for example, full IPv6 support, that even that doesn't have full capabilities of. So we're now moving into areas where we are taking those underlying PBK effectively config files and manipulating those directly, which is certainly an interesting experience, as they are pretty much entirely undocumented.
For the most part, you're absolutely right.
But yeah, version 3 is certainly a big one. I suppose for me, or I suppose, what's your favourite feature, kind of out of kind of version 3 and where we're kind of been taking it?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I have to say, picking my favorite features, like picking my favorite kid, but because they're all so good, these are all so helpful. I mean, I don't know if I could pick one. First of all, custom cryptography is fantastic. Some of the settings around interface metrics. One of the challenges that always on VPN administrators will face at some point in their life is name resolution issues. It's a real challenge with always on VPN, simply because of the way DNS works in Windows, and having the ability to tailor the combination of route metrics and interface metrics ensures that your DNS will be fully operational and work reliably. So I think probably those two are among my most favorite, mostly because it just solves such a common and painful problem. When name resolution doesn't work, most things don't work. And so being able to very quickly adjust those settings in the UI, push those out, and know that, hey, DNS is going to work and I'm not going to have to worry about it, I think is probably fantastic.
Yeah, I certainly like those ones. I think for me, my favorite is probably the new DNS feature, because that is something, it's not perfect because ultimately there are so many limitations. So ultimately, for those who aren't aware, we are now able to put in a list of URLs, and at client profile generation time, what we can now do is do an NS lookup on that, get the IP address of that, and inject that IP address into the profile. So
and for clarification, Leo, we're talking about fundamentally adding routes to the routing table, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in this scenario, and maybe just to kind of describe some of the common use cases, there is always on VPN works using IPv4 and IPv6 routing. So fundamentally, anything that goes over the tunnel has to be routed over the tunnel. Unlike direct access, which use name resolution, so you could look up a name and then you could tell Windows, hey, resolve this name over the direct access tunnel. You would always get an IPv6 address back that was completely unique, and so it had to go over the tunnel. So it was very easy to route namespaces over the tunnel in direct access. And it is prohibitively difficult to do that in always on VPN, because it doesn't matter where we resolve the name. If we get a public IP address back, it's going to route out to the internet. Well, what if we need to bring that over the tunnel? What if this is a public website, yet it requires two-factor authentication if I come from an unknown address, but if I come from a known address, then like the corporate headquarters, then I get a different experience, right? In those scenarios, we want to bring that over the VPN tunnel, even though it's a public internet address, right? And this is in a split tunneling scenario. And so the idea here behind this tool is that it does allow you to put well, first of all, backing up a bit, you would have to know all the IP addresses associated with the FQDN or the domain, and you would have to add those to the routing table. And if you're using other tools today, SCCM, Intune, what have you, that's a static entry. And if those ever change, you, the administrator, would have to make those changes. Here, DPC basically does this dynamically. And I think that is a huge win, because if those addresses ever change, and they most certainly do and will, is that the DPC actually updates that. So it will requery those FQDNs, adjust the routing table accordingly. So anytime there's any changes made, those are implemented into the tunnel. So there's no administrative overhead for you, the administrator.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that explanation. It's a really good one, and ultimately it's not perfect simply because we if the IP address changes while the tunnel is between the tunnel regenerations, you're still going to have some level of outage. But compared to the capabilities of today, and I know we've got one customer currently trialing it who's an NHS customer, and they've got services that they just simply have to use, and those are based out in AWS, where the IP addresses can change daily.
Yeah, wow.
So they've had to write their own custom solution for this currently, and they're potentially looking to move over to DPC for.
Very good.
But it's certainly a challenge.
Feature, and by the way, this is a fundamental capability of DPC, is that you as the administrator change or control how the frequency with which the profile is refreshed on the endpoint. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So, yeah, so we default it to 60 minutes, just because that seems like a reasonable number for a VPN that theoretically isn't going to change ridiculously often. But from a testing side of things, we drop it all the way down to 1 minute in our own labs and things. But I probably wouldn't recommend that for production usage.
Very good.
So it might be worth just kind of talking about some of the settings that we're changing around, things like remember credentials and requiring crypto binding, because there's some like we're calling them breaking changes, but it's more of a change to the defaults.
Correct.
And a lot of that is actually based out of kind of some of the discussions that we've had with yourself previously and some of the advice you've given us.
Yes. So around crypto binding. So, and I think it's helpful to understand that many of the default settings that you find in Windows 10 always on VPN, Windows 10, Windows 11, we should just use Windows, I guess, generically always on VPN, are less than optimal. Many of the settings. One of the things that I like about your platform is that it endeavors to implement always on VPN using current implementation and security best practices. And I think that's a huge selling point, and one that perhaps that we don't talk enough about is that anyone can create an always-on VPN profile. There is documentation on the internet. You can get the Microsoft scripts and things like that, and you can create a VPN profile. However, as I'd said before, the defaults in some scenarios are really terrible, and in other scenarios they're just not optimal, or and also could cause issues with usability and things like that. So there's a lot of different settings that are exposed, but administrators won't likely be aware of them. Us as implementers are keenly aware of them because we do this every day, and so. I think one of the cool things about DPC is that there is a lot of knowledge built into this product. So, right, we know that these settings need to be set, and they're set by default. So if you just run through the wizards, most of the time you don't even have to do anything, and you're going to get a very secure configuration. And I think some of the changes that we made recently in version 3 are that way. So there is a setting, and I'd love to display this. Let me. I'm going to try to share my screen here, but I want to bring up the correct VM. So give me 1 second and bear with me. Let's see if we can do this. Do want to share, and let's see if I can pick the right screen. Very good. So here you can see, hopefully you can see, because I don't see it on my screen. So I have to ask the direct question. Can you see my screen? I don't see any feedback on my side, so I just see your smiling face, Leo. Anyway, so here I am. I've got an always on VPN tunnel. And if we go to security and the protected properties, there are a whole host of settings in all of these menus that administrators find extremely daunting. And which to select, which not to select, what are the defaults, those types of things. And I think that when you're using always on VPN DPC, you can have high confidence in knowing that this is going to be set correctly. And there's a couple of settings that trip up administrators, and again, they won't immediately cause any problems, but I wanted to bring them to your attention. The first is this option to disconnect if server does not present crypto binding TLV. So this is a security setting. It's not enabled by default, and it's basically a security setting that is used to detect man-in-the-middle attacks. And so anytime we're talking about providing secure remote access, it's imperative that we ensure that this tunnel is private, right? So now we've implemented all sorts of technology to do this. There's a lot of encryption, authentication, and authorization, but a determined attacker, probably a nation state adversary, might be able to jump in the middle of the conversation and then basically broker the communication between the two sides and pilfer information from within the tunnel because they happen to place themselves within the communication path. The crypto binding TLV is type length value, by the way. Basically what this is that during the authentication process between the peers, specifically we're talking about the user authenticating to the Radius or NPS server, there is a communication exchange between the two peers, and at the end of that exchange, at the end of that conversation, and this actually happens as the client is being authorized, there's an exchange of a hash of all of the messages in the conversation. It very much like TLS. And so what happens is that the server and the client exchange this TLV, and this TLV is nothing more than a hash of all of the communications that took place during the authentication. And if this doesn't match, then it will say, hey, somebody has tampered. Somebody must have tampered with the communication, and the peers will just disengage, right? So the client will drop. Here's the problem, is that if the client is not presented with the TLV, it's not presented with the crypto binding TLV, it'll just assume that the server didn't feel like sending it, and it will go ahead and gladly accept. And so if an attacker is in fact in the middle, they will just simply block the TLV from being sent to the client, and the client in its default settings will just say, oh, well, if you didn't send me one, I'm just going to go ahead and connect anyway. And that may be a bad idea. So by default in version 3 of Always On VPN DPC, this is actually set by default. This is my recommendation, and this is the default secure posture for this particular setting. The next setting I want to talk about is enable fast reconnect. And I think this was set, I don't know if it's in 3, but I think it came out a little bit earlier. Refresh my memory, Leo, but this has been around
yeah, I
for
think
a little
we had it in some of the early versions of version 2, simply because that's kind of the default that a lot of the Microsoft policies have in it.
Yes,
it seemed like a good idea at the time.
You're absolutely right. No one ever talks about what this sounds. Enable fast reconnect, and by the way, it actually sounds like a good feature. I want to speed things up. I want to be fast. However, this feature is actually for wireless. And by the way, interesting tidbit. This whole menu here, everything in Protected Deep is actually owned by the wireless team at Microsoft, not the networking team, not the security teams. It's actually owned by the wireless group. These are all Wi-Fi related settings. Enable Fast Reconnect is helpful in a Wi-Fi scenario because it allows us to kind of streamline the re-authentication process, meaning a client has already authenticated to an access controller for a Wi-Fi, and they switch to a different access point. In this case, what it's saying is that, hey, if you've already authenticated, we're going to go ahead and kind of trust you because you said you were authenticated to another access point, and we're just going to kind of streamline that process. It really shortcuts the process. So it speeds up the authentication process, does not require a full re-authentication event to take place every time you switch Wi-Fi access points. And that's great for Wi-Fi. The problem is that we're providing secure remote access from a completely untrusted network, being the public internet. If somebody authenticates to the server, we want to make absolutely certain that they go through the entire full authentication process, because we need to have a high level of assurance to know that those clients are who they say they are every single time. And so enabling fast reconnect for VPN is actually a really, really bad idea. So once again, here, AOVPN DPC helps you do the right things right out of the box. And then you as the administrator gain the advantage of, kind of our collective knowledge and knowing what all of these very specific settings do and how they work and why they should be set or why they should be disabled.
Lovely. Well, thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
I will just grab the screen back. So wanted to kind of run through a few of the kind of more advanced things that we can do. So this is really where we have taken, we've taken the architecture that we've managed to build, and because of the unique way that we are being able to process those tunnels and actually do processing on the client side, where we've been able to kind of have some great additional.
Did you get that message?
Sorry, are you guys able to see my screen?
I can see it, yeah.
Lovely. So we're able to kind of do things that other solutions can't necessarily do. So kind of one of the great capabilities here is around that dynamic force tunnel exclusions. So by default, that you have this capability to add into your XML the capability of saying, hey, don't put these certain sections or these certain IP ranges down the tunnel. And we've also actually embedded into the tunnel. It looks like we're having some people who can't see the screen.
So that's Rhiannon. I'm seeing your screen. How about just a quick poll?
Yeah, we get
I have
quick.
maybe it's just Rhiannon. I
please.
don't know, but I see your screen. I'm watching along
We've
here.
got
I don't know if
certain
anybody else
people who
is.
don't. Let's disable the share.
Give it a kickstart. That's weird, yeah.
And let's reshare the screen.
I mean, far be it from Teams to be buggy, right?
Oh, that looks better. Lovely. So yeah, by default, from a profile perspective, you can say this range of IPs, let's not put them down a tunnel. And we've also created, we've simulated that, or we've carried that over into into DPC as a kind of a standard feature, along with the ability to kind of name these things, because these can be excluded for any number of reasons, and people tend to want to track that. And then came the pandemic, and a lot of customers we were seeing going, we need to get we need a VPN, and what's more is that, especially in kind of public sector and kind of clinical scenarios, they're using Microsoft 365 services. And they want to put all of their networking traffic through their data center so that they can manage, control, and kind of track it. But well, Teams especially, but Outlook and all of these other services can be very high data, not to mention can really mess up the kind of quality of service and packet fragmentation and all of those oh so wonderful things when it comes to unified communications. So you naturally want to exclude this. And this is one of those areas where AOVPN really does knock direct access out the park. Because you can now do what is known as a forced tunnel with exclusions, whereas direct access, unfortunately, if it was forced tunnel, it was forced tunnel, and there was no getting around it.
Absolutely.
Apart from the particularly interesting kind of NCSC/CESG solution that Microsoft put together for public customers, but that had its own set of challenges.
To say that was difficult to implement and manage, and not only that, but support, would be an understatement. This is infinitely easier to support, no question.
So the other challenge that came in with this, so Microsoft put out a script that allowed you to modify your kind of XML profile and add in the Microsoft 365 routes for exclusions. The difficulty with that is that Microsoft actually reserves the right to change this list weekly.
Sure.
And when you are dealing with a more traditional deployment methodology, it's technically doable, but that takes your administration overhead from I need to worry about this once every 6 months to I now need to worry about this weekly, and you're now spending significant time and risk for your IT administrators to handle that.
You bet. And I think I think I alluded to this previously when we were talking about the ability, the way always on VPN works is it works by routing. So using a forced tunnel means you basically there's a 000 route, right? So everything comes over the tunnel. But when that's not desirable, I need everything except, that becomes a challenge. Now, again, Microsoft did build in this ability to do forced tunneling with exclusions, and as Leo alluded to, Office 365 is probably the number one workload that you would want to exclude, right? So for those organizations doing forced tunnel, they probably go ahead and trust Microsoft on this, right? So hey, if you're going to get to all the Microsoft properties, go to the cloud. Let's just go directly. Let's not bring that tunnel, bring that traffic back over the tunnel. But again, as I'd mentioned before, everything in Always On VPN works by IP routing. And so you would have to know all of the IP addresses and have to populate your routing table accordingly. So there's two huge problems with that. One is that's a lot of administrative work. First of all, Microsoft publishes those routes. That's fantastic. But God bless you for pounding all of those routes into XML or entering them in the UI and Intune, because you're going to be there for a day and a week, right? Just typing those in. And by the way, good money is on the fact that you're going to make a typo and something's going to be broken, and all that stuff. So I think this tool is fantastic for those organizations that do need to force tunnel. Even if this wasn't dynamic, it would be a huge win. But the fact that you have the ability to dynamically monitor and maintain these settings is fantastic. Leo, can you speak to how the updating process works for force tunnel exclusions as well? How often you go out and check and whatnot?
Sure. So we've turned all of that pain and effort into a single tick box of you enable this one setting that excludes Office 365 from your VPN. And so
wow.
The way that this works is that as part of the profile generation process, we check to see whether you've enabled this setting, and if it does, the client will actually go out itself to the Microsoft endpoint, which is, I think, endpoints.microsoft.com or something equivalent to that. Yeah, and in fact, it says it there, endpoints.office.com in the help file. So the client will go out to that endpoint. It will, and that returns a JSON file with all of the URLs, all of the IP addresses, etc., that are required by Office. So we filter that down, pull out the list of the details that we can actually deal with, things like IP addresses, and we both cache that so that if you don't have a network connection as you're building the profile in the future, we can at least give you the last known good set, and then we inject those into the excluded profile list prior to us generating the profile. So that happens every time the profile update function runs, which again is by default every 60 minutes, meaning that you should always have the latest versions of those files up to date, or those routes up to date as Microsoft published them.
Fantastic.
And then we had one customer recently who said, that's great, that's really what we want, but we also want Zoom and like 5 or 6 other services.
Sure.
And so that had some interesting and like they had some CSVs and things like that they wanted to include, and it's like that wasn't architecturally scalable for the DPC solution. So what we've done instead is we've actually created it's effectively a proof of concept script. It's a that will allow you to point at any kind of CSV or JSON file, which affect any way you can get a list of IP addresses as a in an array, either directly off the internet or from a local file system, and it goes and modifies the excluded routes group policy. So it's effectively going back to that original, you need to type all the IP addresses in manually, but without the whole manual thing. Very good. The advantage of this solution is that it's for the customer to run when they want, how they want. We just provide it kind of as is, no warranty from a script perspective. Go do with it. If you wanted to point to, as here, the example we're using is the Zoom meetings list, but if you want to go point it at I can't remember who some of the other people are, but you can point it effectively anywhere that's published to add those excluded routes in without needing to constantly retype the addresses.
Outstanding. And is this capability in version 3, which is due out imminently, or was it any of this in version 2?
So the ultimately, actually, these are all features that have been baked into the product for a while. The script itself doesn't actually ship with the installer. I believe that it's stored in our support system, so that when you purchase DPC, you get access to our support portal with a bunch of knowledge-based articles and things. I believe that's in there. If not, certainly reach out to us and we can kind of provide that on an as required basis.
Excellent. It's funny, I think we already covered that one, Leo.
Lovely.
Yeah, other than VPN strategy, I'll talk for 2 seconds about VPN strategy. So VPN strategy is a setting that many always on VPN administrators would be familiar with if you've done any tinkering. By default, there are 2 predominant protocols that are used by Always On VPN, and that's IKE-v2, which is IPsec based, and then SSTP, which is TLS based. From a security perspective, IKE-v2 offers better security options. It is not more secure by default. It's actually far less secure than SSTP. But at the end of the day, it does have more dials and switches and levers to pull from an administrator's perspective to make it very, very secure. But again, just a standard disclaimer there, it's not very secure out of the box. SSTP, or let me back up for a second. For IKE-v2, the advantage is security, of course. There are some known performance limitations with IKE-v2, and of course, operationally speaking, it uses non-standard or non-web ports, which are commonly blocked by firewalls. So it's a real challenge to implement and reliably, because you don't have control over every firewall. Your endpoints could very well be behind a restrictive firewall, and Always On VPN wouldn't work if you were using IKE-v2. The advantage to SSTP is that it is TLS based, so it uses HTTPS, right? TCP port 443. If you have access to the internet, you have access to TCP port 443 outbound, no question about it. So Always On VPN with SSTP works every time. I do have customers who say, hey, listen, you know, I want to take advantage of the advanced security capabilities of IKE-v2, but if it's not available, I want to fall back to SSTP, and doing that is easier said than done. Now,
absolute nightmare, isn't it?
It is absolutely, because there's a whole bunch of things that are by design in Windows that conspire to work against you. So first of all, this setting is not exposed anywhere in the UI. When you select automatic from the protocol type or enter that into your XML if you're building XML, automatic is prefer SSTP and fall back to IKE-v2. There's probably very few scenarios where SSTP wouldn't work and IKE-v2 would. So it's probably, and really this is Microsoft's thought on this, is that automatic really equals SSTP. And functionally speaking, practically speaking, that's what that means. So if you want to affect this change, you actually have to go into an INI file or an IF file and change the setting, and that setting is called VPN strategy. And there's a number of different strategy settings, and as Leo alluded to earlier, poorly, if at all, documented, right? It's certainly well out of date documentation. So a lot of the settings are, you just know because we've been dealing with Microsoft engineers and support folks, and so we've learned them over the years. Here's the challenge, is that you can update this setting, and then Windows by default goes out and changes it if it feels like it. So if you set it to prefer IKE-v2 and fall back to SSTP yourself, what will happen is it will go out and it will fail to connect to IKE-v2, it will fall back to SSTP, and then Windows updates that setting for you. So even though you changed it, it's going to change it back. So the beauty of Always On VPN DPC is that we've taken all of the tricks that we know to persist this setting and bake them into the product. So not only do we set the settings for you and then give you a nice little drop-down list, so you don't have to know all the numbers. You don't have to know that 14 is the one you want, or 7 or 6. It's just listed there. You want SSTP only? You want IKE-v2 only? Do you want SSTP and then IKE-v2, or IKE-v2 and then SSTP? You tell us, and then we bake that in, and their product updates that. And also there's a little bit of secret sauce in there. Specifically, it's a registry key that you can have and set and tell Windows to say, hey, don't mess with my setting. I'm actually setting it, and so it will persist. So again, kind of some global knowledge there built into the product that takes a great deal of pain from the administrator, from you. It's just a drop-down box now.
Yeah, the other one that I came across relatively recently was if you set it to automatic, the back Windows goes, oh, well, you don't want IKE-v2 then, so we're just going to disregard all that custom cryptography stuff that you really actually do want from your IKE-v2 tunnel.
Fantastic point. There is a bug in Windows. It is still there today. And that bug means that if you specify the native protocol type as automatic and you define custom cryptography, it's not, in Leo, in your experience, probably the same as mine, it's not that it gets ignored. It gets borked. I mean, they put some weird settings in there, right? So in that scenario, something's definitely broken, but obviously not not enough or not the right customer has complained to Microsoft about it. So you're right. So if we implement this with DPC, you guys obviously have to take care to implement it in the correct order or implement it in some other way to ensure that when the administrator says, hey, I want automatic and I want IKV2 and then SSTP, that it gets implemented correctly and functions properly.
Yeah, so the way we actually do that is all profile ingestion is actually done under IKV2. And then after the profile has been successfully imported into the operating system, we then use the Win32 API to say, hey, we don't actually want that to be IKV2, we want it to be SSTP first.
Outstanding.
And that way we get around it. It still breaks some of the reporting side, which again we had to work around, but it's at least it's functional that way.
That's fantastic. I think the moral of the story here is that there is a tremendous amount of pain that you're going to save administrators by implementing always on VPN DPC. If these, there's so many things in this tool that you would want to do that that we've been doing and have to do manually for many years, just simply makes these point, click, and ship, and that's why I'm such a huge fan of the product. So.
And so the final kind of thing that we I kind of wanted to talk through was some of the ways that we can handle kind of backup and recovery of AOVPN in those kind of scenarios where a device is kind of kicked off the network. And a lot of this actually kind of came out of the Telford and Wrekin case study that we had, and some of the ways that they started using the platform and kind of not quite experimenting with it, but using those new capabilities that they previously didn't have. And kind of the first and the simplest approach is, if you've got a problem with it, rather than you needing to put a custom XML and kind of elevate the system and do all of that kind of complicated stuff to get a manual profile onto a device, it's actually now just a case of run a batch script to update the registry settings, or the same registry settings that the group policy updates, and then restart the DPC agent, which will then do a profile refresh, pick up the settings from registry, and that should then get you kind of back on the network, ready to pick up the group policies moving forward.
Fantastic.
The next capability that I think is kind of really powerful, especially in your kind of larger organizations, is that ability to pilot your settings changes, rather than you having to kind of manually copy files over to places. You can actually use those group policy kind of configurations, the way that group policy was designed to be used, and even things like the group policy advanced consoles, if that's part of your organization and your change requests and all of that side of things, to say, hey, we're going to update this setting, let's see what it looks like on this small group of computers, and then let's push it out, let's replicate it round, let's make it bigger, and kind of slowly roll that setting out to users in a kind of sane and roll-backable way, with kind of inheritance and all of those great things that group policy kind of provides. And then the final thing that we were kind of introducing with version 3 is this ability to do a backup tunnel. So this, I already know of several ways that customers are going to use this, not necessarily in a backup context, but it does allow you to make changes to one profile while also having that ability to have a manual fallback for users in the event of an emergency, or that something's broken, but still managed in the same way as your kind of primary tunnel, should you want to do that. And I know that one customer is using it where, rather than having that whole IKV2 then fall back to SSTP, they primarily want the IKV2, so that's what they're putting on the primary tunnel, and then their backup tunnel is actually an SSTP. So rather than it being an automatic failover, they've actually made it so that it's a user.
Just a manual, manual failover.
Yeah, a manual transition. And I think the other one that will be really interesting to some customers is where you want to go for kind of an active passive multi-site kind of scenario, but you don't want all the complexity of kind of geographic load balancers and Azure Traffic Manager and all of that stuff. You can kind of point at your primary as your as your main tunnel, and then just have, from a policy perspective, of if that fails, you use the backup tunnel, and that's just configured to a separate endpoint.
Fantastic.
So on to the Q&A. Is there any that you want to kind of pick out first?
Great question. So where am I? I'm trying to find the QA here. So I don't know. Let's see. It's loading for me. Apologize. Oh my gosh, lots of questions. Let me. Let's see here. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Very good. Let's see. A lot of these are your poll responses here. Do you see any other questions?
Go to published. At the top.
Oh, okay. I was looking at something different there. Ah, very good. Okay, cool. Yeah, so some of these are, I think you can answer. Obviously, public release for V3. That's imminent, correct?
Yes, so we're in release candidate 1 now, which
okay,
from our perspective means that it's feature complete, it's tested, it's ready to go. Mm-hmm. But we are very conscious that we're dealing with entire organizations' remote access strategy here. So our advice and recommendation at this point for release candidate 1 is to get it onto kind of your IT users, your IT friendly users, really kind of test or kind of kick the tires of it, make sure that there aren't any customer specific problems. Mm-hmm. Because we have made some major changes to the back end update mechanisms that, while we believe are far superior to the old ones, it's like anything when you're mm-hmm. making major changes.
Absolutely,
want to be relatively cautious.
You bet.
We go and kick a 50,000 user
and what I would
organization
say,
out.
Exactly, and just to assure the audience also, I've done quite a bit of testing with Always On VPN DPC and have been testing version 3 here for a bit. Seems to be stable and reliable. All the new features and functions are working as expected. So I work very closely with Leo and the team at Power On to not only do evaluation testing, and I do present them with some unique scenarios, I know, but at the end of the day, it seems to be good. And then 3, again, if it's imminent release, I think it'll be fantastic.
Yeah. So if we. So yeah.
I was going to get on to the next question here, Leo. I'm conscious of time here.
To answer the question. Ultimately, if we don't see any issues, we're hoping to actually release it or kind of make it GA within kind of a week or 2.
Fantastic. So here's a question. Anyone having issues with Always On VPN with a server-related outage, and then it results in clients needing to wait 15 minutes before they can reconnect? And the answer is yes, that's a really common challenge and issue. And there are 2 things. One, if you're behind a load balancer, like a third-party load balancer, Camp F5, Netscaler, A10, what have you. Oftentimes there are settings that need to be changed on your load balancer. So the most common is if this is happening with an SSTP based tunnel, many firewalls don't issue a TCP reset on real server failure, and that's an optional setting. So you may have to dig through your settings on your load balancer to ensure that if there's a real server failure, that a TCP reset is issued to the client. The client will then reconnect almost instantly. However, for IKE v2, it's a little bit different because it's UDP. And of course, UDP is connectionless, right? We can't send a reset. So in that scenario, there are settings that take care of that. And I want to actually show you what those look like in DPC. So here we are in the DPC group policy object on my management workstation. And the setting in particular, and again, just to reiterate here, IKE v2 network outage time is the setting we're looking for. Here's the deal. IKE v2 being UDP has something called IKE Mobility built into it. And IKE Mobility is a feature that is designed to help with the connection establishment process, right? So you're on Wi-Fi, or there's underlying network issues and the connection drops. When the connection comes back up, normally a normal VPN connection would terminate, and then you'd have to re-authenticate. And in the days of not automatic VPNs, that was work that a user had to do. And so in this case, IKE Mobility was designed to, hey, you know what, we disconnected, and then the connection came back up, just transparently and silently reestablish the connection. The problem with that is that it can work to our disadvantage when we have load balancers. And specifically what happens is that the connection comes back up, you get bounced to a new server, but your client says, hey, I want to resume the session that I was kicked out of. And so it basically, you get the stalemate where the client's talking to the server says, I don't have that connection. And the client says, okay, well, I'll wait until you do, right? It's never going to. And so that's the timeout interval that you're looking at. You can actually affect those changes. So if we go here into the advanced settings, you'll see that there is an optional setting called network outage time, and you can adjust this. So in other words, I could set this to something lower, like 5 minutes, or I can, if I wanted to, I can set it to something higher. I typically recommend that if you're using a load balancer that you disable this. And there's 2 settings. You would want to disable network outage time. And actually, I think this setting disables both of them. So there's 2 settings that you would have to adjust. But when you disable it, basically the outage time is set to 0. So we've effectively disabled this. So if you're using Ike V2 and you're having those problems, network outage time is what you would want to set. And when you set network outage time to disabled here in our UI, it basically disables Ike mobility entirely. And you shouldn't have, or you should have less of those problems, I should say.
Lovely.
Very good.
So in terms of can you have multiple VPN profiles? Ultimately, we offer 3 profiles at the moment. We've got the primary user tunnel, the primary device tunnel, and we now have the new option in V3 for a backup user tunnel, which is all the capabilities of a user tunnel. It's just always on is set to false.
Very good. I want to get to another question here that's up. It says, when we first inquired about DPC a few months ago, Windows 11 shipped with some APIs being broken. Is this now fixed? And does DPC support Windows 11? This is unfortunately out of our control. And that, yes, there is a bug in Windows 11 that is preventing some of our management capabilities for always on VPN. Specifically, there's a bug in the WMI where there's a specific class that we need to enumerate that for whatever reason doesn't enumerate. Maybe you can speak a little bit more to that, and also maybe inform the folks about when we're going to get around this problem.
Yes, so this has been a very painful experience for us at PowerOn for a long time, because we would absolutely love to give just to say, yeah, Windows 11, go for it. Unfortunately, the way that Intune and DPC work is that they talk to the CSPs, which are built into Windows for modern management. And specifically, you access that through what's known as the WMI to CSP bridge. And the class in that, which is the VPN v2 class, they fundamentally broke in Windows 11. We have a support case with Microsoft on it. The current information that they provide us is that they have identified and fixed the issue. We are still waiting for the private version of the patch to be released so that we can kind of validate that they fixed the issue from our perspective. And then we are hoping that that patch will be rolled out to the wider Windows 11 world. Hopefully kind of August, September time, but with anything when you're shipping to over 1 billion devices, timescales can vary massively. But as soon as we get those patches out the door, we are going to be gunning very, very hard for a Windows 11 support.
And it will be welcome. So hopefully they get that going soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see we're getting quite a few questions on kind of the pricing side of DPC. So the high level on that is that it's banded pricing. So between 2,500 and 6,000 devices is kind of a single price. And one of the things that we've made a conscious effort to do is not make it a subscription model. So it is a perpetual license for the purchase, and you get to use the versions of the product that were available within your maintenance contract. But if you would like to hear more about it, please kind of message us either here or for info@poweronplatforms.com, and we've got a link at the end of the presentation, and we can also set up trials if people potentially are interested as well.
Fantastic. We are actually over time. Do we want to wrap things up?
Yep, I think so. So any questions that we've not specifically answered, we'll kind of get back, we'll kind of type those up, and we'll email those out as part of the post-webinar pack.
Very good.
So as I said, you can contact PowerOn at info@poweronplatforms.com, and you can email Richard at rich@richardhicks.com. We've also put a link to your amazing book in the chat as well, if people want to check that out.
Oh yes, AOVPNbook.com. Have a look. There's a lot of good information in there. And I'm also, I'll make this. This is the first public announcement. I'm actually going to make this right now. I am just wrapping up a Pluralsight video training course on Always On VPN. You heard it here first. I've not leaked one stitch of this on the internet. That's the first time those words have come out of my mouth publicly. It's world exclusive. Yes. So look forward to that. And there's actually going to be stuff in the Pluralsight video training course that's maybe not even covered in the book. Most of the stuff's probably covered on the website at some point. But anyway, looking forward to getting that published soon. But yeah, thanks for having me, Leo. I appreciate it. It's been great.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I do apologize to this is the predominantly UK audience here. I'm on the west coast of the United States, so it was very early this morning for me. I apologize if I didn't sound chipper, but anyway, thanks for having me. It was great to participate in this fantastic solution, and I think that it'll be tremendous value for your customers who implement it.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.